Hi guys, James at RampantLionReviews again for you today with another beer review. For this one we are going to head up to Gothenburg once again, or Göteborg you should say in Swedish, and we're going to go back to a brewery who you've seen me review a number of things from before, and this is one of their series that I always get really quite excited about. So we're going to go to a little town called Jonsered, which is a bit to the northeast if I'm remembering correctly, and we're going to review another beer from Poppels Bryggeri, who are actually the largest organic beer producer that we have here in Sweden. So for this one we're tasting another beer from their Projekt series. This is Projekt 15, Projekt 15 basically, and this one is an Imperial Brown Ale coming in at 12.5%. This beer was released very recently through the small partiers that we get through Systembolaget over here. So very curious to see how this one turns out. If you've watched my channel before, you'll know that I absolutely love brown ales. I don't get to review too many of them, but any opportunity I get to review some of these, I always take. You know, I tried Brooklyn Brown when I was first kind of tasting beer and things like that, and that's one of these beers that's always just kind of stuck with me. Brooklyn Brown Ale is one that I have always enjoyed, so I'm very curious to see how these guys interpret this style, particularly when it's an Imperial one. I think this beer will be a little bit of a monster, and considering how good their Russian Imperial stout is, I'm very curious to see how they've done with this one. So as always, I hope you guys enjoy my take on this beer, and I'm certainly looking forward to it. So anyway, as is usual with my review then, I'll tell you a little bit about the brewery. If you want to get straight to the tasting, just fast forward. All the usual links are in the description below. That's the brewery website, the link to my other reviews that hopefully I can do in the future from Poppels Bryggeri. I've done a number of them before, and check out the link like I said. There's all the usual social media. If you want to see more beer reviews, do please consider subscribing to the channel. The whole channel, of course, has a geography-based tagging system, so you can go into the home page and search for beer based on country, city, state, county, prefecture, whatever it is you're interested in. Do check out the playlist of beers from different countries. There is one there for all the Swedish beers that I've reviewed for you. That's constantly being added to, and as always, please do get in touch and let me know some of the other beers and breweries that you guys would like to see me review. It's always great to hear from you guys that are watching the videos, and the support that you show the channel is hugely appreciated. So anyway, to tell you a little bit about Poppels Bryggeri then, on to my brewery notes. So Poppels Bryggeri, as I've mentioned to you before, were originally based in a town called Mölnlycke, which is to the southeast of Gothenburg, but they're now based in Jonsered, which is a little bit to the northeast of the city. But the brewery is named after that, which was owned by Johan Poppel, who was a very well-known German-Swedish brewer who spent a lot of his life in Vålberg to the south of Gothenburg and also in the city itself. But he was born between 1605 and 1610 in Lower Saxony in Germany, but then moved to Sweden with his family in the 1620s. He met his wife Katarina Krakow between 1624 and 1628, and he later founded Gothenburg's first brewery with her officially in 1649, but it's thought they had been brewing since around 1638. He's also said to have written down the protocol of the city of Gothenburg in Swedish for the first time, as opposed to German. But the brewery apparently remained in the Poppel family, and the most famous site of the brewery in Gothenburg was at Stigbergstorget. But the current brewery itself was founded in 2012 in Mölnlycke on a site that was apparently owned by the Poppel family, and this brewery is owned by 15 beer lovers, and they basically aim to focus on pairing beers with food, and that's what they design a lot of their recipes for. So the current head brewer is Daniel Granat, and he's a bit of an experimenter, but he's also known as a perfectionist as well. So most of the time he brews his beers 4 or 5 times before he'll allow them to be released, and apparently he also reads a lot of different beer blogs and things to keep up to date with all the new beer styles and, you know, current events in the brewing world and technological advances and all of this kind of thing. But in 2015 they moved to a new site in Jonsered, which is to the east of Gothenburg, and this site has a restaurant and also a shop as well, and they also boast the title of being Sweden's largest organic beer producer as well, as I mentioned at the start of the video. So yeah, one of the bigger craft brewery operations that you have in Sweden these days, but as I say, I always enjoy it when they get these little Projekt beers out, because it does show that for a bigger brewery they are always experimenting. It does tend to be the case actually that if these Projekt beers go down really well and they sell well and they get good reception for them, that they'll actually put them into the core range as well. I think one of the first beers I tried was the I can't remember the number of it, but it was one of the Projekt ones, but it has since become the Passion Pale Ale. That's one of the regular beers that you'll now get from Poppels, which I think is pretty cool. So hopefully this one's good, and hopefully again this is going to become a regular brown ale. I know the Russian Imperial Stout that they do which by the way is a very, very good beer. Have a go at that yourself. That started out, that was either Projekt number 1 or Projekt number 2, something like that. So, you know, definitely check out that beer, and that kind of shows you, like I'm saying, that they'll always put their beers into the core range if they sell well. But yeah, that's all you really need to know about Poppels Bryggeri just now. If you get the chance to go to Gothenburg and check out their restaurant, do have a go at that. That's something I still need to do, of course. But yeah, that's all you need to know about the brewery just now. If you want to learn a little bit more, check out the brewery website in the description below. You can of course follow them on Facebook and Instagram and stuff like that, and keep up to date with all the latest goings on there. But let's get on to the actual tasting of this beer itself. So I'll just let you have a little look at the artwork on this beer before we open it up. There you can see it's pretty standard from Poppels. You know, their Projekt beers always look pretty similar to this. Sometimes it's just a slightly different colour there. You know, it's a brown ale, so they put brown on it. I think the IPAs normally are like a sort of dark emeraldy kind of green colour. There you can see the Poppels bottle cap on this one, which again is pretty standard. Tells you on the back here. Here you have a brown ale with extra malt. Brown ales were first brewed in England in the year 1700, and they come from the fact that they use extra brown malt. In our imperial offering, I guess that would be, we've used some dark syrup, some kind of sugar, foreign sugar, I'm not sure how you would translate that, cocoa nibs, and cannelle, which is cinnamon. So this is a beer that is, it basically says here, this is a beer that is very dark and very nice, basically. So yeah, and it has a little quote, of course, from Daniel Granat as well, basically saying that his beer, he really likes this one. They always put this on their beers, I think, which is very cool. Like I say, Daniel Granat is a little bit of a perfectionist when it comes to this beer, but they've also got a little thing here about the 6th year anniversary, 6 Års jubileum, which is basically saying, yeah, this is our first brown ale. You know, and it's come from many effort. I think it's come from many efforts, and then we've brought it back and released it. And this is new, crafted, variable, and I'm not sure what the last little bit says actually. But the one thing you'll always find on the Poppels beers as well is they actually give you, as I was saying, they like to focus on pairing their beers with food. So they've always got a little thing like this which tells you what you should pair it with. So it says it's good for a first date, it's good for cheese, and Husgreite, it's something to do with autumn, but I think it's like an autumn roast, that would be. But yeah, it always tells you a little bit about the hops and things like that as well, which is good. I always like that little touch that they have on the Poppels beers. So yeah, if you get the chance to try some of these beers, have a go at them. This beer, of course, was limited to only 2,000 bottles, as it tells you here. So yeah, let's get this guy out and we'll get on with the tasting then. Like I said, very curious to see how this one turns out. And I have to admit, I do like these little stubby bottles. This is something that seems to have been brought in Sweden because they're easy to recycle and stuff. And when you open this beer up, straight away you can smell some of these lovely brown sugars. Let's just sugar the last little bit up, see if we get a bit more of a head on this beer. To be honest, when you pour this beer, it actually just looks like an Imperial Stout, to be honest. We can get rid of the computer. But yeah, like I say, a 12.5% Imperial Brown Ale. But in terms of appearance, I'm thinking that this just looks like an Imperial Stout. Yeah, if I hold this beer up to the light, absolutely, you know, it's really a dark ebony rosewood colour. If I was looking at this and just saying, you know, is this a brown ale, I would think this was a stout, an Imperial Stout in terms of its appearance. Because you can see when you sugar this beer up, you can tell from the way the lacing's behaving that it's quite oily, and you know, the boozier a beer is, you know, the sort of thicker and more oily you can see just around the edge of the glass. But yeah, in terms of colour, this is definitely a big ebony rosewood colour, this one. There's a solid, I would say about 3/4 finger of a frothy kind of coffee tan head on this one. I would say 1 or 2 big bubbles sticking towards the side of the glass, not many at all, and you can see a few little ones just popping up towards the bottom of that head there. But you know, overall it does look pretty nice actually. But like I say, in terms of appearance, I would have you know, if I was looking at this beer, I would think it's an Imperial Stout. Normally you'd expect a brown ale to be a little bit more kind of chestnut or mahogany or something like this. So this is a little bit surprising about this. But in terms of you know, if it tastes like a brown ale, that is the main thing. The colour for me is not the most important part of the beer. So let's take a closer look at the aroma then and just see how we get on with this one. Oh, that is a monster of a beer. just recovering from a cold at the moment, so my smell is actually getting back to what it should be. But yeah, that smells really nice. There's a lot of nice chocolatey aromas in this one. Big, you know, it's got the cocoa nibs that are coming out of this one. You can really smell that sweet chocolate. It's quite a high cocoa chocolate for me, you know, 80-ish% cocoa. This beer, interestingly enough, to me, it almost has a little bit of a licoricey aroma from it, and I don't think they said that they put licorice in it, or, as I say, I don't really know what foreign sucker is, but it could be, it says they've added some kind of dark syrup, so it could be a very, the brown sugars in this one, it comes across, when you take it in a little bit more, it has this very sort of treacly molasses sort of thing about it, that really dark, syrupy brown sugar to it, but I definitely think there's an element of licorice in the aroma of this beer. It's almost, and you can also smell, to me, that the aroma of this beer comes across as a little bit medicinal as well. It reminds me of some of these, you know, the sort of fruity characters you get from some of the Belgian dubels as well. It's definitely got a little bit of that almost phenolic quality to it, which is quite interesting. But lots of chocolate, high cocoa chocolate at that. Some nice brown sugars as well, like I was saying. And yeah, it's a really interesting beer, this. There's a little bit of a nutty aroma in there for me as well. I don't know if it's like hazelnuts or something like that, but there's definitely a nutty quality to this beer. And that's mixing in. It almost smells like the chocolate and the brown sugars are infused with this kind of nutty quality, and the cinnamon is really quite obvious as well. I think it's the cinnamon that's kind of that's almost giving off a little bit of this sort of brown sugar quality. I mean, when it comes, you know, this is Sweden. They love cinnamon buns, you know, the kanelbullar, and they love licorice. So to be honest, when you've got a Swede brewing a beer like this, it's not overly surprising that they might want to infuse it with a little bit of something like that. You know, the Swedes absolutely love their kanel and their lakrits. They love their cinnamon and licorice. And to me, those licoricey notes, and there's definitely a licoricey, and also the cinnamon character in there as well. So yeah, there's a little touch of earthiness from the hops, but I think the hops basically take a back seat in this one. It's a very sweet, malty beer, this. In terms of fruitiness, you know, it's got a little bit of that kind of phenolic quality to it. It reminds me of the Belgian dubels a little bit, but there's definitely some kind of candied red fruits in there. There's a little bit of the sharper, raisiny plum kind of thing. But I would say as well, maybe there's a little bit of a, you know, that I always talk about this, but those little heart-shaped sweets that you get in the Haribo Star Mix, it's got a little bit of that kind of candied strawberry-ish note to it as well. But to me, in terms of aroma, this seems like a very interesting beer. The aroma that comes off of this one actually reminds me of the Dugas Cinnamon, which you saw me review a few videos ago, which was released in the same lot of small partiers. They have quite a similar aroma, although I think the cinnamon is less punchy in this beer itself. But as I always say, take a little bit of time and enjoy the aroma of this one before you get stuck in. But I think this is going to be a very typically Swedish brown ale, so very curious to see how it turns out. But let's get stuck into this one then. So this is the Poppels Projekt 15, an Imperial Brown Ale, project number 15, at 12.5% from the Poppels Bryggeri in Jonsered, to the east, or kind of northeast-ish of Gothenburg. Let's get stuck into this one. Slange, skål. Yeah, this beer, you know, as I was saying, in terms of appearance, I might have guessed this one was a stout, but in terms of the actual flavour and stuff, it's not creamy enough to be a stout, if you like. It is more, you know, stout is an ale, of course. It is a type of ale, but this, you know, it doesn't have the mouthfeel of a stout or anything like that. It's just the colour. And, you know, as I said, the colour isn't the most important thing. Most definitely, this beer is a brown ale, so just bear that in mind when you try it. And you know, I always like that when you get things when you're doing this beer review, these beer review videos that will surprise you. And you know, I was really wondering about that when I saw the colour of the beer. But yeah, I'll say straight away with this beer, it is a good beer. I'm trying to think how many. I've had a good few brown ales on the channel, but in terms of Imperial Browns, I've not had that many of them. The only other one that I can think of really was the Karma Citra from Beer Here on Bornholm, which is from Denmark, and that's, to be quite honest, that's the best brown ale I've ever reviewed on the channel. And I think I've said that in quite a few videos where I've reviewed brown ales. An Imperial, and that one, I think this is heavier in terms of alcohol than that one was. If I remember right, that beer was around 9 or 10ish, something like that. So this beer is a lot heavier. This is the heaviest brown ale that I've ever reviewed. And to me, this one, the way that the flavours are kind of coming across in this, I think this would be a good seasonal beer for Poppels. You know, because it's got the cinnamon, it's got the sort of licoricey flavours in it. To me, I don't know if this would be, it's a good beer, don't get me wrong on this, but to me, this is one that's, and I would guess this is why they've released it now, with the cinnamon flavours and the licorice, it just would strike, my first impression is, oh, this is their Christmas beer. That's the first thing that comes to me about this one. But I will say, don't take that in the wrong way. This is a good beer, but it just comes across to me as being very sort of Yule, Christmas orientated. So let's try and break this flavour down a little bit. As I always say, when you've got big dark beers like this, sugar them around your palate a little bit and just let your whole mouth adjust before you start trying to interpret them too much. So yeah, with this beer then you can feel there's a little bit of that pale malty quality, that just blankets the middle of your palate there. On top of that, you start to get these nice chocolatey notes. There is an element of a roasty malt to this one. It's not black malt. It does have a little bit of a roasty, toasty character to it, but it's not really dark and bitter in the same way that some of these Imperial Stouts and stuff can be. This is more of a sort of smooth, oily, creamy, sweet beer, this one. It was, maybe creamy is not the right descriptor, to be honest. Yeah, but as you would expect with this one, on top of that little bit of a very slight bready base, the brown sugars are very, very, they're really strong in their presence with this one. So for me, lovely big molasses treacle sort of thing to this, and that passes, it starts in the centre of the beer, but with that bready quality, you can feel that the cinnamon flavours are almost, it's almost just like it's completely infused. The cinnamon flavours sort of blanket your whole tongue in this beer. When you go a little bit further forward on it, to me, there's a little touch of a woody element to it, just on the front, kind of sides of the palate there, and then right in the centre. Just when you go, as I always say, you get that oily bubble behind the front curve of your tongue where the fruity notes come out. Ignore that for the moment. Go behind it, and just there you'll get a little bit of this nutty quality. Go out to the sides of that, and there's a little bit of a woodiness to this beer as well. There's definitely a good hint of chocolate in this beer as well, and I would say it's in terms, you know, in the aroma I was saying like an 80-90% cocoa. I don't think it's quite that. It's maybe around a sort of 60-70ish%, so it's starting to get to the heavy cocoa side of things, but it's not quite there, and that complements these kind of brown sugary notes quite well in this one. But the cinnamon, as I said, is quite a strong presence in this beer. It's a very, probably for those of you watching outside of Sweden, this is a very Swedish interpretation of a brown ale for me. It's a very Christmassy Swedish sort of beer, this, like I said. And it is good. I like these flavours, but you know, when I would first come to Sweden and try this beer, it probably, you know, I probably wouldn't have liked it then as much as I would now. If you know how the Swedish palate is and stuff like this, and you know that I like kanelbuller. I do like licorice a lot more now than I used to be honest. This beer is one that's probably a bit more, it's definitely geared towards the Swedish palate. I don't think there's any doubt about that, and it's quite a Christmassy Swedish beer in my opinion too. It's really nice actually, but just be aware of this. If you're trying this as a non-Swede, I guess, or someone who hasn't lived in Sweden for quite a while, it might be a little bit kind of pungent for you, if you like. It is very prominent and very kind of straightforward, straight edged in terms of some of these flavours. But I like what they've done here. As I always say, this Projekt series from Poppels always throws out some really nice beer, and this one is no exception to that. What I would say is that this is definitely a more Christmassy interpretation of the brownie. I'd like to see them do a kind of straight up version of this, maybe take the cinnamon out of it a little bit and brew a more kind of straight up imperial version of this, because the cinnamon for me makes it a very Christmassy beer rather than anything else. That said, the cinnamon isn't sort of overpowering the beer, it is complementing things, but like I say, it does give the beer that kind of Christmassy edge to it. I'd love to see these guys have a go at a Scotch ale as well, because they seem to be very good at brewing the high kind of malt content, high alcohol beers. The Russian Imperial Stout, like I said, is very good, and it started its life as one of the Projekt beers. It was, I forget if it was number 3 or 4. Might have even been Projekt number 2, but these Projekt series always throw out some very, very good stuff, like I say. So I'd love to see them have a go at a Scotch ale. But yeah, very, very Christmassy feeling beer this. In terms of the hoppy side of things, we focused on the malt base quite a bit. In the back corners of the palate there's a nice earthiness to this one. It does have a good little bit of bitterness, but it smooths out as you come kind of further forward, but the earthiness does really stick there. I don't know if they've used English hops in this one, although going by some of the flavours I might guess that that is some of the thing. But there's a little touch of floral quality on the front corners of the palate. You can pick that up, and it's a little bit grassy around the very front curve of the tongue, and behind the front curve of the palate you've got that nice oily bubble where some of those juicy fruity esters start to come out of the beer. And as I was mentioning in the aroma with this one, it comes across as quite sort of medicinal and phenolic. It does have that kind of quality that you can expect of like a Belgian Bruin or a Dubel perhaps. It has that sort of medicinally red fruit, almost cakey quality to it. This beer, to me, does remind me a little bit of Christmas pudding or something like that. It's just, it really is a sort of Christmassy brown ale, this one, so they've released it just at the right time actually. But in terms of the fruity side of the beer, I would say when you take it in, you've got a little bit of a sharper, raisiny plum edge to this one. It starts to smooth out a little bit, then you get these more medicinally phenol sort of red fruity qualities to it. It starts to become progressively more cakey, and then right on the front kind of corner of the front curve of the palate, it starts to become slightly more candied. It's got a little bit more of that sort of candied strawberry sort of flavour and things, and that progresses the further into the aftertaste that you go. But for me, the fruity notes in this beer are quite nice, and that sort of medicinally feel that this beer has kind of complements the cinnamon quite well. Those two things, the cinnamon and that sort of medicinally feel, are really making me feel this is a Christmas beer rather than anything else. It's one of these ones that you have. It really reminds me of Christmas pudding. So yeah, I think in terms if they're going to release this as a regular beer, I would take the cinnamon out of it and do it as a more kind of straight up thing. For me, as a brown ale, this was one that you can definitely see that is geared for the Swedish palate. Whether they've intended it as a Christmas brown ale, I'm not quite sure, but if they wanted this as a year-round release, I would take the cinnamon out and sort of work with the recipe a little bit and push it that way. As a Christmas beer, it's very, very good. This one, I think it would be a very good seasonal beer for them to release this if they did it every year. So, thumbs up to Poppels for this. It's an inventive beer, and like I say, Daniel Granat, he's known as a perfectionist with these beers, and I can see it would have taken him a long time to develop this. So for me, really solid Christmas beer. If it's going to be a more regular beer, take the cinnamon out of it, or tone it down a little bit at least. and just play with the recipe a little bit more that way. But yeah, a really interesting beer, this one, and I like it when you get beers like this that just make you think a little bit about what's going on here. So it's been really cool to do a tasting of this one. In terms of the mouthfeel, full-bodied beer, I don't think there's any doubt in my mind about that. Very smooth carbonation. The mouthfeel overall is quite oily for this beer. Lovely big malty sweetness to this one. There's a little touch of spice to it, of course, from the cinnamon, but mainly it's a big sweet oily malt base. The hoppiness in this one, there's a little bit of IBUs, I'd guess around 30, maybe pushing 40 at the absolute most. And there's a nice juicy fruity quality to this one as well. Like I said, it reminds me of the Belgian Bruins and the Belgian doubles as well. It's got a little bit of that kind of phenol-y medicinal quality, and that'll mainly be down to the sort of licoricey flavours and also the cinnamon that's in this beer. But overall, a really interesting one, like I said, and I'm glad that I was able to review this for you. So I hope you guys have enjoyed my take on this one, and I hope the guys at Poppels Bryggeri have kind of agreed to some extent with what I've said. I like the Imperial Brown style, and as I say, I think this one, if I remember correctly, is the heaviest brown ale that I've ever reviewed. But thumbs up to Poppels Bryggeri for this one. I think this would be an awesome kind of yearly Christmas release, and if they played with the recipe a little bit and took the cinnamon out, it would be a very cool regular release to to bring out as well. So yeah, let's leave it at that for this one. I think my voice is going to break out quite soon. But yeah, thank you once again for watching my beer reviews. It's been really cool to review this one for you. A style that I very, very much enjoy, and a brewery that always puts some interesting things out in their Projekt series. So as always, thank you for watching my beer reviews. Until the next time, please like, subscribe, share, all the usual YouTube stuff. Let me know your own thoughts on this beer in the comment section below. Let me know what your favourite beers are from Poppels Bryggeri as well. And I'm sure I'll return to these guys in the very near future. Make sure you check out my social media. But this one was the Poppels Projekt Femton Projekt 15, the Imperial Brown Ale at 12.5%. An awesome Christmas seasonal beer. I think if they played with the recipe a little bit, they'd be onto something very, very solid for a regular brown ale release. But thank you again for watching, and I will catch you guys very soon. Slàinte, skål.